Hi, everybody. I'm Anne Leslie from IBM Cloud, and I'm delighted to be with you today for this DORA webinar. I'm with a panel of experts from PayPal, from Microsoft, and from Deutsche Börse. And I'm going to start by introducing Sofia Pograbinska, PayPal, Bastian Bannemann from Microsoft, and Christian Gorka, who's from Deutsche Börse. We're going to be talking about how DORA is an opportunity for building better resilience, notably through collaboration between financial institutions and technology providers, including cloud providers.
Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for the opportunity. I'm thrilled to be here. Fantastic panel of the experts. I'm looking forward to discussing. And Dora, it's something that I suppose we all in financial industry can relate to. So I'm hoping this is going to be a lively discussion with some stories and anecdotes, and that everybody in our audience can to some extent relate to. I suppose everybody has felt kind of an imposter syndrome. At least 70% of the people, I'm pretty sure, felt an imposter syndrome. DORA is very ambitious regulation, lots and lots of incremental requirements, lots of nuanced judgment required. So it's been a steep learning curve, I suppose, for the most of the industry. But yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Bastian, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, Bastian, I'm the FSI Compliance and Business Development Lead of Microsoft Germany. I'm very excited to be here too, amongst this incredible panel. And yeah, DORA is now live for about 2 weeks. I think the whole industry waited for 3, 4, 5 years. And now it's still kind of not fully final, so everyone is waiting for the last steps to be finalized and then to see how it's working and going to work in practice in the next weeks, months, and years. So excited to exchange some thoughts today.
And Christian.
Yeah, thank you a lot for having me. I'm Christian Gorka. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer of Deutsche Börse. And yeah, as the others already mentioned, DORA touches like everyone who has anything to do with financial industries. So especially across the organizations, subcontractors. And when you look into the cybersecurity field of the attacks outside the financial industry, there are so many attack vectors where maybe DORA has a good intention in first place, but the second question is how can we actually implement it in an efficient way, and how will the regulator look at these implementations? So future will tell us.
So there's lots to unpack, and we're going to have the opportunity to have different perspectives from different people sitting in different parts of the ecosystem. But maybe just to level set, we kind of made an assumption that if you're tuning in to listen to a webinar about DORA, you're probably impacted by it in some shape or form. It tends to be a bit of a niche specialist area. But a level set is probably time well spent. What is this trying to achieve? What is it about? So DORA essentially is a regulation applicable across the European Union, so the 27 member states. And it's looking to harmonize the rulebook and the baseline levels of information security and communications technology, right? So that famous acronym of ICT. And essentially what it's looking to do is raise the bar. So it talks, for example, about bringing in information risk management, about looking at third-party risk management, incident reporting, the sharing of information, testing, big topic, testing. And the challenge that there's always been in the European Union is that in our diversity comes divergence. So DORA has this ambition of bringing us all together around a shared unified framework with shared expectations. However, as Christian said, time will tell how it actually gets implemented and how it gets enforced. So I'm going to start maybe by turning it back to you, Sophia, and just I'd love to get your thoughts about the register of information, for example. Is one of the things that I know you've been working on. Could you talk to us about what challenges that's brought to you and to your team and your colleagues in your work, and the other things that are sort of associated with that particular item that requires attention?
Yeah, that's a good one. In fact, register of information, in my opinion, this is very helpful, by the way, development, a very welcome development, is very helpful risk management tool. But then, of course, it was one of the challenging requirements. This is a net new requirement under DORA, because I'm with my risk management background, obviously I think about every opportunity, turn it into a risk management tool. But then how about the data availability? Many firms operating in a very complex group setup, so that complicates things. But then collecting all the data points about every third party is a pretty complicated process as well. What's interesting about it, it's really what it starts with. It starts with understanding what are your critical and important functions for the enterprise, and then mapping those critical and important functions into the third parties, and then collecting all the information. So that can be quite a process, but I think especially with some innovation, some technology put on top of it, imagine some AI running through those records and telling you this line is not like others. So that brings you indeed a very a much better level of oversight, additional level of insight. But I've heard a lot of stories that, in fact, that this was a very challenging part to implement. And because it was a new thing as well, many companies, in fact, felt very much challenged.
Which is really interesting. So, the fact that you're pointing to it as it's work, but we're seeing the benefit. It's giving us new insight. It's giving us an additional set of data, really. I think maybe that you can actually uplift your entire risk management capability.
But it's true. It's also, it allows you to look into it differently. You can look, okay, for all the third parties, do we have an exit strategy? And now let's look through a different lens. Let's see what are the third parties linked to critical and important functions, and do we have exit strategy for them? How difficult will it be? Will it be to replace a provider? Let's say. What is the substitute provider? Have we tested those strategies, etc.? So there's so many aspects to unpack in there.
Absolutely. So it's sort of the entry point to a lot of follow-on activities, many of which are in DORA, many of which are, even if they're not in the regulation, they're sort of considered best practice in terms of managing information security and risk management. Yeah, get it. Christian, I'd love to hear from you. It's a large organization in the category of FMI, so financial market infrastructure, I think, which brings a high level of scrutiny. How have you and your team and your colleagues been approaching the DORA adventure?
Well, good question. First of all, what I want to underline, what I said at the beginning, is why should we at all deal with DORA? And I think yes, there's a regulatory component to it, but I think the R, as you explained in the beginning, and R is for resilience, is quite important. And why is that? Because I mean, if you look at our institute, or actually across Europe, across all the financial institutes, we come of roughly multiple billions of business actions per day in the financial industry in Europe. So, and most of these actions as of today are done in a digitized fashion, meaning it's highly interconnected, it is online. And so on the other hand, this means the financial systems are very vulnerable to cyber risks. So this means at the same time, successful attacks can cause considerable damage, but not only to the financial enterprises, but also to the whole market, to the whole real economy, and to the general public in the end. And therefore, we have a very high level of responsibility in the financial services overall. So it's important for the financial enterprises to enhance our own resilience to cyber attacks, to also continuously and preventively test against threat models and threats from the outside. So in order to reduce this risk of financial interruptions while at the same time increasing resiliency against several attacks, this is actually quite practical compared to previous regulations. It is not, it is actually a welcoming part to have a DORA on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, we are now facing a lot of, let's say, changes, and these changes come in on several levels. So when you look into DORA, you have to rethink maybe your risk management. You have to think about how to handle your incidents. So there needs to be a clear level of detection, report, managing, and so on. And this is where you see that DORA was actually influenced from the US regulations, which is quite fair. But what's also new is the third-party risk. So actually looking, what Sophia already mentioned, is looking into the parties the financial services are actually interacting with and handing over parts that the financial institutes have to fulfill to the subcontractors. And this then ties closely to resiliency testing. So testing, not only, having a checkbox and seeing that, hey, I fulfilled my compliance, but actually testing if you are resilient or not. I think this spans across multiple units, and this is where we bring together different departments and units to then together fulfill the requirements of DORA.
So what I'm hearing from both of you, and I'll pass it over to Bastian now in a second, is something actually that I think a lot of people find a little bit counterintuitive. It can be very fashionable to be anti-regulation. It's almost a default. From this conversation and just the conversations I've been having and working groups I've been involved in, conferences I've attended, I've never heard anybody argue against the principle. I've genuinely never heard anybody say we want less resilience or we think resilience is not a good idea. Everybody that I've spoken to, by and large, is bought into the idea, exactly to your point, Christian, which is we rely so heavily in terms of our economies, and private citizens rely on financial infrastructure. It's really important that it work, it be sound, it be trustworthy. It's how do we do it? And the other thing that people agree on is DORA is hard work. But I think, and it's probably one of the value of getting a group like this together, because what we have on this panel are companies that could, in certain circumstances, be competitors. And yet we're here together discussing something that unites us because we all have to contribute to it. It's bigger than any single firm. So I'd like to pass it over to you, Bastian, because Sophia was talking about third-party risk management and the register of information. And what that actually creates is like we have a dependency on each other. Right. So, you and I both work for companies who are cloud providers, and we sell services and deal very extensively with the financial sector. And we're kind of on the flip side of that, the register of information. I'd love you to talk to us a little bit about how you're kind of being impacted by this and the types of things that are coming to you from clients, how it's impacting ways of working, and just what this means for a large company like Microsoft.
So first of all, what most of the customers tell us is that DORA is not a revolution, but it's an evolution. So it's further developing the standards that have been in the industry for many, many years already. It's kind of increasing the bar step by step on the very important domains of resilience, security, third-party risk management. What I like to also kind of say is, or kind of to refer to the football analogy. What in IT is a Champions League of resilience testing is chaos monkey testing. What the Champions League of security testing is threat-led penetration testing. And on both those domains, the regulators are increasing the expectation from maybe the first Bundesliga to the Champions League for the most critical financial services firms. What we also hear from customers is that usually the DORA requirements, but also more broad, the FSI compliance requirements can be separated into 4 core buckets. One is the contractual compliance between the financial services firms and the ICT providers. And there, of course, it's also worth mentioning that DORA is evolving the term, what is an ICT service? So it's a new definition that everyone needs to get used to. And that's what both Christian and Sophia also alluded to, the importance of having a register of information. Combined with a challenge that, especially in this area, that regulation is not yet final, so it's still kind of in the final cooking. But as of end of March and in April, all the financial industry firms need to deliver their registries. That's causing a lot of work for both for regulators, for financial services firms, and also for ICT providers delivering such information. The second part is all the what I would call off the cloud compliance, where we as a provider need to demonstrate how we implement security and resilience controls on our end, how we provide good services, how we make sure that we have the right attestations, how we make sure we have the right due diligence support and audit offering, and how we communicate with the customers and collaborate with the customers in an incident situation. The third core area is then the customer security, the in the cloud technical security. And there also DORA brings a higher expectation of listening to provider security and resilience expectation, what we call well-architected frameworks or well-architected recommendations, where there's an increased expectation that financial services firms make sure they understand what the providers recommend and act on those recommendations and document the areas where they don't comply to those recommendations. And the fourth area we usually hear is what I would call other compliance topics, which is more on the financial services side, but less technical. So the requirement to have a proper training strategy for the employees in place, the requirement to have internal policies and procedures, exit strategies, BCM plans, regulatory notifications, all those kind of less technical things. And most of the requirements on DORA are expectations that need to be met by controls in all those four areas. And that's where we see increased collaboration, for example, and understanding the collaboration in an incident situation by enhancing the general provider steering. Like with the most critical customers, we do have quarterly meetings or sometimes even monthly meetings to go through how we work together, to explain what has changed, to address challenges, and to kind of exchange information. And that's really kind of evolving in criticality.
Absolutely. And you're just making me think of terminology that I read recently in a publication by BaFin in Germany, where they were kind of taking issue with the shared responsibility model. And the reason they were taking issue with it was because from a supervisory perspective, they consider that the responsibility for delivering on outcomes is with the firms. So what they do in their publication is they say, we're looking for shared competence. And what it means is that there are things that providers need to do, and there are things that firms need to do, and the combination of those allows the firms to deliver on their responsibility. And I just think that's a really nice way of thinking about it. What are we good at? And what do firms need to be good at? And what do we need to be good at together? One of the things that I've noticed over the past few months is that the firms and the providers, actually, who are doing well at this and getting more comfortable with it, are building more clarity. I can think of a few firms in particular where it was hard work and they spent a lot of time on it and they brought in external consultants to help them with it. But they really got a solid foundation about, out of all of the things that they do in the world, because they're a GSIB, very, very large bank, we're carving out this subsection, 30 critical functions and services. And the rest, they're important, but they're not critical. And what it means is that they have a really set direction now, and they've built a consensus. And I'd just love to hear from you, all three of you actually, whether you're experiencing something similar, a process of getting to more clarity and trying to build up agreement with different teams, because that seems to be a challenge. The collaboration that's needed within individual organizations, teams that may not know each other that well, who have to get to know each other, develop ways of working, sometimes overcoming friction because they mightn't see the world the same way. I can see Christian nodding his head. Do you have any war stories to tell us about how this is going?
No war stories, just harmonization stories. I mean, you have a lot of different teams in enterprise, in financial enterprise. So you have IT teams, you have information security teams, you have legal teams, you have compliance teams, you have outsourcing, you have business continuity. You can go more or less endless with this list. But the point is, what DORA is now asking us to do is to force the organization to understand one or multiple threats from the outside or inside, and then act as one unit against it, or stand as one unit against it. As Bastian put it, you need to have these controls in place. You need to test these controls, but these controls, you test actually the resilience effectiveness, and this is only possible if you have like the harmonization layer. So I would say you have a horizontal layer, which is a harmonization layer where you actually try to understand all of the different risks, all of the different threats that emerge, and you want to react to them as best as possible. But on the other hand, you have also a vertical line. So horizontal is, again, unite everybody, harmonize everybody. But the vertical line is what I find also interesting. It's the last part of our one other pillar of DORA, which is also the training. So while we are looking at, bring everyone on the same page from a control point of view, from a DORA regulatory point of view, we also need to think on the humans who actually have to act on this, which goes from every employee to every employee, including the executive board to regular programmer, and everyone is participating in this exercise. So this, I think, is kind of new, and which was not, at least not required as strictly beforehand. So this is how I would put it.
It's true. I'm also considering the ultimate responsibility sits with the management body. Luxembourg has about 5,000 billion assets in the fund industry, and this is the second largest in the world place for the funds. Big part of the industry realized, that those controls have to be implemented. The DORA became applicable to them. Nothing like that was applicable to them before. So a lot of entities suddenly became in scope of DORA, and that was where really there was a very steep learning curve. I'm hearing this a lot because in risk management framework, let's say, there's fairly standard requirements that were already applicable to credit institutions, for example, to the banks. So yes, definitely this is an uplift in the requirements. We need to do things a little differently. We need to have stronger controls. But for many of the entities, it was really difficult. In fact, so we have a lot of delightful events, really delightful industry events here in Luxembourg, and many of them we have our regulator CSSF presenting. They have made a survey. In fact, in Luxembourg there were 3 surveys last year about the DORA readiness. One was Trade Association ABBL, another one was PwC, I think, and the other one was conducted by CSSF. Top challenges: first, understanding DORA requirements. So a lot of people in the industry really said that they truly appreciate that the regulator and others and Big Fours, communicating very openly and communicating a lot and explaining the DORA requirements. Second challenge was shortage of resources. That's natural. But then one of the biggest challenges, in fact, was dependence on the group, resulting in coordination complexity. So it was complex to coordinate. Many of the respondents apparently found it really difficult to coordinate those efforts within the group. Now, in the group setup, like you said, Christian, I think this is an important concept as well. The transversal engagement across the different stakeholders. Yes, we need to coordinate horizontally, also vertically. We need to obtain sponsorship, ensure the appropriate, governance duty and such. So those were the main challenges, and this is something that was shared. But I wanted to share something else. In fact, I find it fascinating that the survey was conducted and analyzed. The data was analyzed, by the way, really nice data analysis across all the different categories. There was credit institution, fund management firms, etc. So they have split it, and it was more or less homogeneous across all the different categories. That people find it incredibly difficult to negotiate with the service providers.
Yes, the relationship with third-party providers. So IBM Cloud, as my title on screen suggests, work for a cloud provider. And one of the things that we've been discussing internally with our own teams is, how do we show up right? Because there's nothing in DORA that says that any given provider needs to be delightful to do business with, right? But there's an opportunity in there for all providers, not just cloud providers, but an opportunity to define how you want to show up in that space. I think that's where we're going to see a certain shift in buying behaviors on the client side. I can imagine, because I've been on the other side, I worked in a bank. If I was in a bank these days and I was in a position to decide what technology provider I was going to work with, I can anticipate that I would be looking for a provider who not only understood my needs, but was sensitive to them and wasn't going to make my life hell. And I think going forward, what we're going to see in our industry is that because third-party risk management is such a big part of DORA, and because there's such a scrutiny on the supply chain, people are going to want to simplify. They're going to want to rationalize. They're going to want to take out friction. And if they can't get the answers that they need, I imagine that they will be reconsidering who they do business with. But again, that space there is one for every technology provider and service provider to navigate, and there's an opportunity there. I'm not surprised when you say that people are finding that there are difficulties. I am hopeful that we are in a learning curve, and people who are in positions of influence and authority will say, yeah, okay, it's in our interest, our commercial interest, to actually show up in a certain way. And the way I've been thinking about this with our internal teams when we're debating it, what should we do on a given topic, is there's a phrase from a business writer that I really love called Jim Collins, and he talks about the genius of the and. So instead of having a false dichotomy, which is if I concede something to you, I'm hurting myself. No, in this space, when we're talking about resilience, is how can I show up, in a company setting, and by helping myself, I'm also helping you. So it's not a concession, it's a change in behavior, it's a change in posture, but it doesn't have to be a concession in the negative sense. It's just a change. And I think there's a massive part of DORA, which is mindset. And it's not something that gets discussed an awful lot because we have regulatory technical standards and implementing technical standards, and they're very prescriptive and they fit in a spreadsheet. Mindset doesn't fit in a spreadsheet. And yet it's such a crucial part of the work done on resilience. How we think about it and what it means and how we take the concept and put it into behaviors changes completely the outcomes we're going to get. So we're doing what we can, and I imagine Bastian and his colleagues are also doing what they can to take friction out. It's a process, and I think it's going to be an interesting one to observe.
Maybe from my side, so what I'm seeing, I think culture is very interesting, but you exactly as you described, and on a day-to-day basis, you're like really deep down in, hey, I need to fulfill this requirement, I need to fulfill this RTS, I need to fulfill this article of DORA. So you're very much into the depth. But the moment you zoom out and you ask, why am I doing this and what is the benefit of this? The benefit is more or less not for you as a single employee of a company. It's more for society and for the culture. But this is very hard to understand because companies like the ones from Sophia or mine have to invest a lot to move to this place, to come to this place, as have you, or from, let's say, the provider side. But I think this is the crucial point that we need to understand. It's about the collaboration between the financial institutions and third-party providers like the cloud service providers, because this is where we get, in the best case, a positive feedback loop. For example, the software providers can implement better security because the customer is asking for better security. The moment one customer is asking for better security, the whole platform, the whole ecosystem will increase in resiliency and security, making it harder for the adversaries to break it and making it easier for other companies who are just using the same ecosystem to being much better have much better security posture than they would have without it. So you have like the economy of scale, making it cheaper for a single unit or for a single company to leverage the security. You have the more efficiency across the scale and the shared infrastructure. And what you said before with the shared responsibility, it's a responsibility to also, show it or like delegate the responsibility within enterprises to subcontractors, but it's also a shared responsibility to every one of us. Again, the financial service industry is also helping to move your money, probably. So you're also interested in this.
Absolutely. Bastian, when we were prepping for today's webinar, we were talking about collaboration, right, and what it means and how it shows up in our work. I'd love to hear from you if you could tell us a little bit about what collaboration looks like in terms of the work that you're doing with financial entities, how things are shifting, what you're changing, the questions you get asked. How is this impacting you day to day in the collaboration with your own teams and then externally with the firms that you're working with?
Definitely. So what you see with DORA is a new kind of wave of customers approaching us, asking for recommendations, what other customers actually do to kind of implement the best DORA requirements and to kind of evolve and mature their own outsourcing posture. And that's what we actually do is we work together with hundreds of customers in Europe to understand what they do, how we can better serve them with our products, but also with the compliance offerings we do have. You talked about the importance of classifying and kind of slicing what is very critical, what is medium critical, and what is not critical. I really like this picture because this is actually what we see, what differentiates a good financial service customer from a very good financial service customer. The good financial service customer has a very classical risk-averse approach. And regardless if we talk about non-critical workloads or critical workloads, they plan for every application as it would be the most critical workload. That's good from a security perspective. That's good from a resilience perspective. That's maybe all good from a regulation perspective, but that's not good for innovation and for kind of getting to the business outcomes that the companies usually want to have. So what we see the best kind of most successful customers doing is they have a very good approach and kind of slicing what is not critical and kind of focusing really on the critical and most critical pieces. And that's where we have very intense discussions with the customers to help them kind of mature in how they use our services. We support our customers, for example, with well-architected framework reviews to help the customers identifying areas to evolve in their security posture. We, of course, also get continuously challenged by our customers, performing audits on ourselves, asking us difficult questions. You will never satisfy all customer demands, but every customer demand is helping you to evolve. And when you've worked with financial service auditors, you know there is no audit without an observation or a finding. So it's not a matter of not getting any findings. It's how you kind of work together with the customers on those observations, how you kind of mature your own security organization, and how do you kind of evidence that you have progressed. The other part where we see the DORA expectations kind of evolving is especially around incident preparation and incident response and business continuity, because there is a clear understanding not everything is perfect. Everything will fail. It's just a matter of when it will fail, when there's going to be an issue. So it's getting more and more important to prepare for those things also on the communication between providers and the financial service customers to make sure that you have the runbooks in place so that everyone knows what to do when there's a bad morning.
You made me smile there. So many things in what you said were so relatable. I did hear an anecdote from one client who was telling us about he'd never seen so many people in the organization suddenly want to be critical. Because there was this perception that if you weren't critical, you weren't going to get attention. But to your point, you just reinforced my own observation, which is that the firms who are managing to progress at pace are the ones who've been able to make that distinction and get clarity on what really makes the economic engine of their organization function and what really would have an impact on the financial sector, the ecosystem, clients if it went down. Very similar to what you were describing, we're much better able to help our clients and add value when they come to us with a clear articulation of their problem statement. When they come to us and say, how are you going to make us DORA compliant? It's not an impossible conversation, but it's a longer conversation. When they come to us and say, we've identified this business service sitting on this cloud service, and we've got this expectation in terms of impact tolerance. Can you help us work on some scenarios? That's a much more focused conversation. Now, there's a lot of pre-work. I'm not underestimating the pre-work on the customer side getting to that point, but it's just to say it's another example of that shared responsibility, the shared competence. And I think what I'm observing is that we're getting to know our clients much, much more. I think a lot of technology providers are going through this learning curve where we're realizing we might know the people, we might know their procurement teams, and I'm being a little bit facetious here, but do we really know where our technology sits in a business process? And Sophia, you mentioned it, right, in terms of those dependencies and the process maps. We're able to help more when we know more. And I'm just seeing going forward that there really is a lot of value coming from enterprise architecture, having people who know service design and who are able to have end-to-end process documents that in a very visual way show what a process might look like. And it's just like that kind of collision of worlds where different skill sets and different domains in the enterprise come together to actually build up that holistic picture. Sophia, are there any more anecdotes that you can share with us about, you know, how you and your organization are sort of working beyond the register of information to actually interact with your providers and sort of operationalize this day to day?
In Europe, we're a credit institution, a licensed credit institution, and that's of course we've been already subject to other requirements, to EBA guidelines and Circular 2286, 2715 risk management and such. Many of the controls were not new as such, but operationalization of the LSL, of the uplifted part, that was one of the tasks for the last year. So that was pretty successful. So I was really closely following in the survey. If one was the most 100% ready, so fully ready, and 4 was not ready at all. So overall, across credit institutions, overall the rating that people chose was between 2.6 to 2.8. So that was the readiness overall. And I think this is a pretty, accurately reflecting the trend. Many of my peers and we ourselves as well, we started off from the gap analysis, of course, even though we've been subject to many of those requirements, that I named. But anyway, some of them have changed, some of them modified, and the gap analysis is not, is just really the basics that everybody should be starting from. And speaking to cloud service providers as well, when you have, conducted the gap analysis, is so much easier. Updating those contracts is so much easier in practice when you already have worked with your own, with your legal, and you've identified, where the uplift is needed. You've come up with some proposal that can be discussed. So that in that way, of course, it goes so much easier. What else I can recommend? Prioritization on the risk-based approach. If you feel that the provider is serving the critical and important function, then prioritize, of course, prioritize the contractual days, prioritize the testing, prioritize, think about the incident report and all that. For me, the basis is, of course, taking a risk-based approach, starting off the gap analysis, engaging with the stakeholders transversely, and making sure that everyone who's in the loop is in the loop. Everybody has a clear understanding of their requirement. Everybody has a say, and there is an alignment how exactly what's the best way to implement it. And the roadmap, of course, for many peers in the industry, since those requirements are just so complex, and some of them have been really finalized just recently. So that in some cases that just gave really small space. So I think everybody appreciates the possibility to test, for example, to test register of information from now to April with a new validation rule. So that's already fantastic. And the implementation continues. But I think what's important is to have a clear roadmap, a clear implementation roadmap. If something is in progress, then when you're targeting.
Yeah, maybe just a final question to you, Christian. You hinted at the origins of the regulation and some of it being influenced by the US, and you spoke extensively about collective responsibility. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you would maybe like to see more of in terms of collaboration that might further that outcome of collective resilience, sort of individual resilience fueling collective resilience? Have you any hopes for our industry that maybe we could think about as a takeaway? What could we be doing more of, accentuating, that would help us?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, from the point where we are right now, we are at a very good point, I would say, because if you look as of today at the cloud, at least as the cloud service provider services that we have, you have a platform that is built to scale by technology and regulations. The technology, like our new features that are implemented on a more or less daily basis. Then you have the regulations coming in from the outside. But the regulations are also updated in regular cycles, not day by day, but usually, at least in EU, regulations are becoming more and more and more. And our question is now, how can we deal together with this? So together, I mean the financial services and cloud service providers. And I think what's remarkable and what we should use is what has been mentioned before, was like the technology. We should not neglect the technology, because on cloud services, we can do things we were not able to do before. Let me give you an example. If I want to know, hey, which virtual machines do I have, or which serverless applications am I running in the cloud, it's just like one command away, given I have the permission to see this, of course. Yeah, but this gives me a much better high quality of data to build an inventory and actually to fulfill the requirements, for example, of DORA and third-party risk management. Same as for monitoring. If I not only want to know what I have, but what's actually going on, what's the state of my cloud, or how do I actually check for cloud native applications and what are they doing? CNAP, you might probably have heard of it, or cloud CSPM, cloud security posture management. There's many tools coming together, providing a good technical foundation to actually show that the service or the platform at all is secure, or at least to see in which level to say its security it fulfills. And now, if more and more regulations coming from the one hand and technology is growing from the other hand, then we only need one thing. We need to bring it together in some kind of an automation fashion. And I think we're going to the right direction with tools like the Open Security Control Assessment Language, or some other tools which are quite similar to actually making all of the resources that we have on cloud actually automizable and checkable for the regulations that we need to fulfill. Give you an easy example. Let's say you have a cloud storage bucket. You want to store some data in there, but you are like a business people and you usually are not interested in security because it's somebody else's job. But your responsibility is it to secure this data. But this is something what, on the other hand, the cloud can do automatically for it. The moment it detects there's a cloud storage bucket, there's a file which is not encrypted, just automatically encrypted. So bringing it all together, I think we will grow again in this positive feedback cycle between customers of the cloud and the FSI, Financial Service Institutes. And on the other hand, in the long term, I also hope, now looking only on regulations, I also hope that we get the Financial Service Institutes and the cloud service providers some support from the European Union. And let me finalize on this last point, what I mean by this. If you introduce new regulations and if you ask more, maybe in the best intent, maybe there's also something in place which could ease this for everyone involved. And this means something like certifications. Think of like a certification of IBM Cloud. Think of a certification of Microsoft Cloud. And it's not any certification, it's a DORA certification from the EU. And the moment you have this certification, like on a car, a license plate, then you're good to go. And I'm happy to leverage your services. And this is where I hope in the long term we will see some synergies.
We're all out of time. We're going to have to come back and have another session on that because it's a fascinating idea. I can imagine that there would definitely be support. I can imagine there might be some pushback too, but that idea of outcome-focused collaboration, resource mutualization, collaborating on things where it makes sense for us to collaborate and not compete. Absolutely. Listen, we're all out of time, and I'm gutted because we could have chatted for many, many minutes more, but you've been fantastic guests. I hope to everybody who's listened in, thank you for your time and attention. I hope you got value from it. We were certainly delighted to have this opportunity to get together and share some insights. For now, thank you all and goodbye.
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.